Tell me about Fannie and Freddie. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you stabilized them at one point, and that's an area where people feel that that could have gone in a terrible way, in a terrible direction.
Yeah, Maria, that's, I think, the thing we did that was most impactful that's least noticed today, because these two agencies are huge. You know, they had $5.4 trillion of securities outstanding. They were insuring half of all mortgages that were originated. Their securities were sold and held all around the world. And when they began to implode, it could have been a disaster if we hadn't come up with a way to stabilize them and to nationalize them. And can you imagine if we had not nationalized Fannie or Freddie before Lehman went down, how horrendous it would have been? I think the other thing that is not generally recognized is that I believe that putting Fannie and Freddie into conservatorship did more to reduce the number of foreclosures and people that have lost their homes than any single thing we did or could have done. And by nationalizing Fannie or Freddie, we maintain them as really the only source of mortgage financing during the crisis. And so just imagine if they hadn't been nationalized, how much farther home prices would have fallen and how many more people would have lost their homes. But as you said to me earlier, when you asked the rhetorical question, do the American people know how close we came to Armageddon? And the answer is no. The American people are never going to give anyone credit for a disaster they never saw, and there's plenty of blame for what they did see. And you can't expect the American people to be anything other than unhappy with the sorts of things we did, because the sorts of things we were forced to do were objectionable. They're objectionable to me as an American. They're obviously objectionable to the public, but they are better than the alternative, because we did this. We did these things to protect the public.
And to be clear, and the Congress didn't see where we were at one point because they voted down TARP initially.
Yes. So to get Congress to act, you know, and do something difficult and controversial, they have to see a crisis. So I look at it this way. You know, the crisis brought out the worst in America, you know, early on. I mean, it was created by the worst in America, greed and excessive risk-taking and flawed government policies. But at the end, twice, we had Congress come together, and it took really strong leadership on both sides of the aisle. Congress twice came together on a bipartisan basis to give the Bush administration unprecedented powers. So, again, one of the things that I am most pleased with in terms of looking back on the crisis is the way it brought out cooperation across agencies, across departments, bipartisan action in Congress, and the policy continuity between administrations, going from President Bush to President Obama.
But on Fannie and Freddie, investors of Fannie and Freddie today will say, I'm still shocked that they're still nationalized. They're still there. And at the time, administration officials were using money from Fannie and Freddie, taking it out and putting it in other places. Is that true?
Well, I would say this, that when we nationalized Fannie and Freddie, no one thought, at least I certainly didn't think, that they were going to continue in their present form, right?
Exactly, right.
Because it was a flawed model, and no one was defending it at the time. But frankly, it worked so well that there was no, compelling reason to change things. And as you said, once they were stabilized, they generated income, which helped reduce the deficit, went into the national coffers. And so, am I unhappy? Am I surprised that there's been no permanent reform put in place? Yes. Do I expect anything to be done in the near term? No. We have huge dysfunction in Washington today, but that's a reflection of what we see nationally. Our country is tragically divided. We're polarized. And at a time when our economy is so strong and growing so nicely and creating jobs, I think it's really important to take that opportunity today and fix some of the problems that predated the crisis. I think because future crises are unpredictable, the most important thing we can do to protect ourselves is to, what we're still strong, to fix some of these long-term problems so that we're more resilient and we maintain our economic competitiveness.
With all of the regulators overseeing AIG, the insurance giant, how is it possible that it was missed and it was actually as vulnerable as it ended up being?
Well, first of all the regulators weren't overseeing it. So,
they were supposed to be, though.
No, they weren't. They had OFEO, their own regulator. Okay, the Treasury, the Fed, no other regulator got anything other than public information, and Congress did not give the Fannie or Freddie regulator the normal powers that a safety and soundness regulator should have to make subjective judgments about capital. A matter of fact, their capital was set by law at a very low level. They were allowed to keep intangibles and count that as capital. So they were a flawed structure from the beginning, doomed ultimately to failure.
Do you worry, given your experience in China, the Paulson Institute, in terms of this spat going on between the two largest superpowers?
Yeah, it's of great concern that the trade wars ultimately hurt everyone involved. But it is totally and completely unacceptable for China not to move to open up its markets. This is an untenable position for them to expect the rest of the world to keep our markets open for their companies if they don't open up for foreign companies. So they need to do more to open up. I happen to personally believe that the right way to go about it is to work with our allies to put pressure on them. I think tariffs are an imperfect and dangerous weapon because tariffs bring with them not only the short-term cost, which is an economic cost on U.S. consumers, but longer term, I think they really undermine our credibility economically and our long-term competitiveness. Because why do foreign companies and countries want to do business in the United States of America? They want to do business because we are reliable in terms of our economic policies. We have stable economic policies.
They get a fair shot.
They get a fair shot. And so why is someone going to want to do business with a U.S. company in the future if they believe that some administration will come along and try to break down global supply chains? And why would they put themselves in that vulnerable position? So that's the danger. But I really do believe the Trump administration's objectives are right here. China needs to open up.